I'm really thrilled to be on stage to moderate this particular talk, the globalization of popular media and culture. So I was in, I've launched a couple of conferences in Africa recently, one in Cape Town and one in Lagos, and I was really struck when I was there. There was some really fantastic, strong local programming, but there were also some really there were some formats that were really popular there, that like Scandal, which was a huge show, and artists like Rihanna. Africa's Next Top Model was just rapping, was hugely popular. So I was really sort of struck by how much Western culture was influencing Africa, but also how African culture, or sort of global cultures, are influencing us here in the West. I'm so glad to have my two great panelists here today to discuss this topic. So I'll start with Biola Alabi, who I met actually at We Africa in Lagos in May. And she was definitely in my top 10, if not top 5, list of women I wanted to have speak at the conference. She is one of the most respected women in Africa. She was the managing director of Mnet Africa, which is Africa's biggest television network. She, hold on, I'm just going to go back to my notes. She also spearheaded the launch of the multi-channel Africa Magic brand into Africa, and she also recently worked to launch the inaugural African Magic Viewers' Choice Awards. She's also worked with leading brands such as Sesame Street, BigWords.com, and Daewoo Motors. And Biola is also currently a Yale World Fellow 2014, so she's very impressive. Peter Davis, to my right, is just one of the people you should all know in New York. He's a culture writer. He was at Paper Magazine for many, many years. He's also written for the likes of New York Magazine, the New York Times, amongst many, many others, but is a real sort of cultural pundit. So I'm really thrilled to welcome my two panelists.
Thank you.
So my first question is to Biola. And I really wanted you to just start by sharing a little bit about the work that you were doing with Mnet to aggregate Western content for an African audience.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and thank you for being here. It's really exciting to be back in New York. I lived in New York for many years before I moved back home, and I've been home now for 7 years, so it's good to be back in New York. I was excited to get out of the train today and actually take the subway, so that was fun again. What's really been exciting, and what was really exciting for me when I got the offer to move back home, was not only that I was going to be able to aggregate Western content, which is really American content. So when people say Western content, what I find globally is that we're all sort of aggregating American content. And so we would all go to Cannes, and we would go to MIP, and for those of you that know, it's a content market, and then we would go to the LA screenings, and we would basically all see the same people there. And I enjoyed doing this, but what I really wanted us to do was look at how we can create more of our own content. But because the Western content was so popular, it was really important that when we started to create content, that we were looking at some of the formats that we knew could travel well. One of the formats that I inherited in my job was Big Brother. Funny enough, when I was in America, I had never watched Big Brother, and so one of the first things I had to do was now basically revamp this Big Brother format. And so I started watching a lot of it. And what I thought was interesting about Big Brother was, initially when we did the revamp, people were really excited about it. But as social media started to proliferate more into our cultures, it really started to change the way we were distributing content. And so, just not to go on too long, what's really exciting to me is about how social media is changing the way we produce content, the way we aggregate content, and the way we commission content. Number one. Number two, it's also redefining the way we distribute content. So how much content do we put online? I mean, as a pay TV operator, and just to put this in context, we we played both sides of the game. So we are the more of your we're like the Time Warner, Comcast, and we're also like the HBO on top of it. So we play both sides of the game, which is becoming more and more common in America, but it wasn't really like that. Globally, it is common that you play both sides of the content game. And so the formats that we've done on the continent became more and more popular, but what we were trying to do was obviously drive people to come to the platform and watch it on TV. But one of the things about youth culture, which is the same everywhere, is people don't really have the same sense around giving things away. So what people would do, wherever there are young, smart people, they're going to figure out a way to rip content, to tape content, even directly from the screens, and they're going to put that content online and share that content. So one of the debates we kept on having was how much content do we actually put out there for people, and what does that do to our business? Does that cannibalize our business? Which in the beginning, all the white-haired people in the room kept on saying, this is going to kill our business. This did not kill our business. This actually drove more subscriptions. So what happened was we were able to create more sort of talkable moments that people now had offline that made people wanted to watch the show more on screen. So one of the lessons that we learned is that people consume content globally the same way, which is people need something to talk about on social media. Facebook is one of the most popular platforms. Twitter is extremely popular on the continent. Everywhere I go, young people are taking to these technologies like water to a mop. And one of the things that's also become extremely popular that's actually creating really interesting entrepreneurs is blogging. I mean, this is something that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, no one talked about blogging on the continent. And now bloggers are breaking news. They're doing a lot of the stuff that Peter is going to be talking about, which is breaking news, actually becoming the primary source of news. And that's outdating other stuff. So going forward, what's really exciting about some of the other formats that we're looking at, and one of our prolific producers in Nigeria is actually here. She's worked on Nigerian Idol, and she's currently working on Kids Say. So Chioma, hopefully we'll get to see those shows coming on air. So I think that as we consume content globally, and as people don't think of Africa as part of the global entertainment market. So I'm glad to be here just to share some of our experiences, some of the stuff we're doing, and also to sort of also shed some light that in as much as there's a lot of news that you hear about Africa, Africans also sort of want to be entertained, which keeps me employed, and they're also just discovering and sharing just as much as anyone on social media. So that's sort of a little bit about my work.
Did you find that, well, one, does it work both ways? So were there formats and ideas that were coming out of Africa or other parts of the world that were influencing television shows here, for example? And also, I'm sure you were sort of adapting the content in some way for those markets. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. I'm not going to say necessarily going to the West, but I think that as African content travels, and I think as we start to stream more of our content, we start to share more of our content through social media, I think that we start to find a global audience for the content, and so we're finding new markets in the Caribbean. We're finding new markets in England, where there's a huge diaspora community. So I think what we're finding is that there are sort of some common themes around African content or people of African descent that they sort of share. And so we're finding those global markets for our content, and that's been very exciting. There is a belief that some of this stuff does cross-border. I mean, my company, one of the first programs we did 20 years ago when we launched was trying to find a Face of Africa. And so the Face of Africa was a modeling competition that was very popular. And actually, if some of you know Leah Kibede, she was a contestant on that show.
Oh, wow.
So this was, yes, before Leah became Leah, she was on that show. So I mean, we believe that we were one of the first people to do a modeling competition. So So sometimes it does travel, but maybe not. Maybe we didn't. Maybe we should have protected that IP a little differently.
Yeah, you didn't get the credit.
Yeah.
Okay,
but we learned. Lessons learned. Always protect your IP. So, I mean, I think that there are some ways and some different things, and I think there are some sort of, but I think the biggest travel that has happened is around our music and around our fashion. So, I mean, I think those are some of the content that has been easy, that is definitely traveling and crossing. I mean, this summer I was in the south of France, and I was in just a taxi, and I mean, just as always, they were listening to African musicians, they were listening to African music. So, I mean, I think that our music is definitely crossing boundaries, and artists are finding secondary markets abroad. So yes, I guess it's starting with something, and that's with music and music videos.
Absolutely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there any formats? I think that with, contests are kind of a global thing. Everyone likes to compete. And same thing with Big Brother. Everyone kind of, there's that feeling. Are there anything that's specific to Africa that might not work in New York? Like, we have like the Housewives franchise.
Sure.
Would that work there, or is that just...
Actually, that would work there.
Or is it already there and I don't even know?
Actually, Chioma, do you want to talk about that? Chioma is currently she's in pre-production for The Real Housewives. Am I allowed to say something? Can I say it?
Are we breaking news?
I know, I'm like, oh my God.
Tweet this right now, everyone.
No tweeting. Yeah. Sorry, no tweeting. But we are looking at some of these formats, and we...
That was an innocent question.
You should have written down what I can and can't say. But I'm so excited about her, so I mean, it's fun to sort of talk about. It's great to run into people that are doing great work on the continent, and so I get excited about people. And when you curate other people's content, and you put it on a platform, you get excited about them doing stuff. But yes, there are some things that don't work. I mean, there are some things that are much more sexually provocative that don't work really well. And I mean, we have to adapt a lot of these things because we do live in we're a Pan-African operator, and so we live in a very regulated environment, but we're dealing with multiple regulatory environments that are very different from country to country. So a lot of times you sort of have to pick a place in the middle and make sure that you're not offending too many people, and you're not getting too many fines, and you don't get shut down at any given point.
Do you get shut down or censored?
Not really censored, but I mean, there's a regulatory environment. It's like the FCC, so if we do violate, we do have to answer to that, and we do have to sort of face a regulatory board. And if we do not respond, or there's not a change in our behavior, we will lose our license. So you can lose your license. That has never happened. It's never happened to anyone on the continent that I know of anyway. So unless it's politically motivated, but I don't.
Are there African Kardashians or Osbournes? I'm curious that have opened their lives up to
there are.
Celebrity and fame.
Yes, there actually are. There are two shows that we co-produced, and one of them is The Real Me with Omotola. Omotola is one of our highest rated actresses. She has I think she almost has 2 million Facebook fans, and I think she has some crazy number of followers on Twitter. I can't remember the number, but I remember that there was a huge thing when she hit 1 million, and then she had 1.5 million fans on Facebook. Facebook is pretty huge, so I remember that. And then the other movie star we did also is Jim Ike Says So, and he's pretty big, and he did open his life, and he is having a relationship with a Ghanaian actress. So that was sort of like these two, so we were filming and shooting in both countries. We followed him around the world. He came and did some shows in Houston, so we were there. He was in Dubai. He was in Monaco. So it was a pretty extensive, so we do have our versions of Kardashians, yes. And there are more and more coming up. And I mean, but really, one of the things that's really fascinating for me are these like almost multi-millionaire bloggers that have been created. I mean, these people sort of came out of the woodwork. I mean, no one was paying attention to the bloggers, and they've now become the first point of news. And there's a woman called Linda Ikeji, and she started like so small. There's a woman called Bella Naija, and she started blogging when reality TV came to Nigeria. So that's sort of how she got her start in the blogging world. She was excited about reality TV, so she just started to follow all the reality TV programs, and now she's one of the #1 sources for news. And this is where young people go. And I think what's also important to understand is that in the next 25 years, Africa is going to be the youngest continent. Its population is going to be one of the youngest populations on the continent. And so young people sort of behave the same way if you give them a cell phone or if you give them a computer. I mean, at the end of the day, what they're looking for is information. And what social media does is a great way of democratizing that information. Even, I mean, you said something about censorship, even though that content is not censored by us, but it is censored by someone, and sometimes that person is Facebook itself. So, yeah.
Are you influenced by what people say on social media in terms of the directions of shows?
Yes, very much so. I mean, one of the things we do is we produce some telenovelas, and we're able to really track the momentum and the tempo of how those shows are doing, how characters are doing on the shows. And a lot of that is combing and really analyzing some of the feedback from social media. And also sometimes when we're looking for leads in certain shows and we're looking more at reality shows, we will look at sort of what type of, same thing, what is sort of your value on social media? So how many followers do you have on Twitter? How many times do people download, sort of view, how many views you have on your YouTube? So a lot of people also are vloggers now, and so they have video blogs, and we also look at that. And so as we cast, the idea is that if you're casting, you really want people to come in with a built-in audience, and so that's also becoming very popular. And video bloggers are also becoming very popular. So these are YouTube channels, and one of the things that artists started doing also is instead of premiering their music videos on regular traditional platforms, they now premiere them on YouTube. And so we have to really fight to get these videos first before YouTube gets them, which then becomes another sort of way of changing the landscape.
Peter, I have a question for you. So you were at Paper Magazine for many years, and style magazines used to dictate really, what we wore, where we went, where we shopped. And now it's really about the sort of style bloggers, and there are a lot of very successful style bloggers here. So where do you think that leaves as traditional magazines and this sort of traditional media?
I think that the way to approach it, I actually, after Paper, I was crazy and started a print magazine with the New York Observer, like a crazy person when print is supposedly dead. But I think that, print will never die. I think that, movies didn't kill theater or Broadway, that's still around, and television didn't kill movies. And so I don't think that social media will kill print or the internet, but I think there has to be kind of a marriage between the two. And I think style bloggers have a lot of influence and power, but I think the ones I don't know, maybe you've heard of someone like Susie Bubble in London, the cream rises, so people with talent will come. I mean, it's like throwing gum at a wall, and you kind of, the junk falls, and what sticks. And so I think that, but at the same time, I think that there's something to say in terms of, she left the Times, but Kathy Horn or Vanessa Friedman has an educated, critical voice, whereas a 16-year-old, it's cute if, you're typing on your, iPhone or iPad and, giving your critique of the Chanel show, but it's not the same. So I think that, it's like a chorus of voices, and there's room for everyone. But you've got to kind of pick the ones that speak to you and the ones that you trust.
So, I mean, in fact, just picking up on a comment you made when we spoke on the phone, you said that trends break by the tweet these days. So how much how much of your information are you getting from social media as far as, what's current and what's interesting?
I mean, a lot. I do think, like Twitter is so powerful, for better or worse, it's like news breaks by the tweet. I just heard something where like the NYPD and the FBI are being trained on how to use Twitter because it's a powerful tool, especially what's happening in the world. And I think, stylistically, I've discovered a lot of things. I really keep my eyes peeled, I discovered this amazing collective called Art Comes First that are from London and originally from Africa. So I think the great thing is it's out there. In the old days, before social media, you would really have to dig around, you know, and it was like kind of like, you know, you told me and then I told Dee, and then, you know, you went and checked it out. And now, you know, it's right there in your fingertips. Literally on your iPhone, you can check something out.
Great. Okay, so we only have a couple of minutes left. So any quick questions?
Earlier this year, I went to the African Film Festival to a screening of Confusion Noir, which I'm sure you've probably heard of. And Kenneth, one of the director of the film, was stating that one of his biggest issues in Nigeria was the difficulty in obtaining a license to be able to show the movie in theaters. And just sort of, you mentioned it a little bit before, the regulatory environment and how that impacts entertainment and media, but how to really kind of circumvent those issues, and especially in a country where licensing is very difficult. There are a lot of bureaucratic barriers and layers to really kind of get through to be able to show your product. Eventually, I mean, he was able to sort of circumvent that by using a lot of social media to actually show the video and kind of gain momentum. But I'm just sort of curious to hear what your thoughts are.
So quickly, I mean, I think we're always going to have challenges, and I think as societies are evolving and things are changing very fast, I don't think from a legal perspective, the laws are changing as fast. So if you look everywhere in the world, like, when was the last time someone said, oh, we got rid of a law? You don't really hear that much. So if you actually go and look at like some of the laws on the books here, someone told me the other day that in New York, there's still a law in the book that while driving across, someone has to be in front waving a flag, that it's actually okay to drive on the street, because I was expressing the same thing. And so the one thing is that our laws are obviously not keeping up with as quickly as things are changing, as quickly as technology is changing. So that is the problem. And I mean, one of the things I'm actually excited about is we're working with a lot of the regulators to help them understand technology, because you can't assume everyone understands what you're doing. So that's number one with that. The second thing is that there is really a process. The process does take time, but I think that because the way people are using social media as part of their marketing, it doesn't give them a lot of time and a lot of lead time for the stories to break when you need the license. So you need to start your process sooner. But we have very, very short production cycles, release cycles. I mean, we keep it going and churn these things out very quickly. So that's part of the problem. So we, the industry, are part of the problem, and so is the regulator.
I just wanted to know if you could address radio as a medium on the continent. I have heard a lot about the Children's Radio Foundation, and one of the things that they do is try to use radio as a medium to reach every corner of the continent. And I think that just like in the US, not every home has a TV. Same in China, same in Africa. But in terms of the infrastructure, their argument is that radio is a really pervasive medium to reach the whole continent. So I was just curious what your thoughts are on the use of radio and how that can bring media to the continent.
I think we should try to merge some of these questions. We might be able to merge them. So should we take a couple more? So I won't forget radio.
This is efficient TV executive.
Sorry.
Hi,
Okay.
my name's Jade, and I'm a senior in high school, and I was just wondering, I don't think that America has the best culture, but I know that a lot of other countries kind of idolize American culture, and I was just wondering if, there are efforts in Africa being made to preserve the culture. So, the youth growing up, are they exposed to more Western influences? Or is there still a strong traditional African culture?
Okay. I'll take one more and then I won't forget.
Okay. Right in the front row, did you still want to ask a question?
It's really hard actually to keep up with culture today. There is so many places and things and ways to try and keep, you said I keep my ear to the ground. I was just curious, especially with youth culture as we get a little older and we're no longer in that demographic, what do you listen to, look at, you're like, these are my go-tos for trying to keep up with youth culture?
Great. So quickly about radio. Radio is the most pervasive medium. We've also tried to buy a couple of radio stations a few times. I'm always looking at radio. Use radio to supplement what we're doing. But I'm a TV exec, so I do TV and film. But I love radio. Radio is always part of everything I do. That's really it. Second thing around culture. We do a lot of stuff around preserving our culture. I mean, I don't think that there is sort of one culture. I think that the more you travel, the more you start to see that it's sort of like it's like sort of a mishmash of all these cultures put together. So there is a bit of Japanese culture, there's a bit of different Asian cultures there. If you go to places like South Africa, Tanzania, even Nigeria, you find a little bit of Indian culture. I mean, we have, in Nigeria, we have a huge Lebanese community. We have a little bit of Lebanese culture. So what you kind of come out with is something that's sort of uniquely new and a youth culture. But there is some heavy Western influence. I mean, American music is very accessible, and what American media execs have done is made American culture extremely accessible through media, and that the distribution of that media is very easy to do. Language it becomes an easier way. It's easier for us to acquire content from English-speaking countries, but the same thing for when I'm in Francophone Africa, it's easier for us to acquire content from French-speaking countries. So it's not always sort of like there. It's really about when you run a pay TV platform, you have over 100 and something channels. You have to keep content on 24 hours a day. You can never create enough content to keep those channels going. We all have to start aggregating all this content from somewhere. So that's one of the other things. But around culture, if you look at what people do is, even if they're taking sort of hip hop or they're taking urban music, they sort of make it their own. So if you're listening to a Nigerian hip hop song, some of the beat might sound familiar, which you can actually argue that the beat originally comes from Africa. But like you use our language, you use our slang. It's really all, I mean, we connect, I mean, the reason why Africans will connect more with hip hop and maybe not as much with hard rock is obviously because those beats mean something. So it's the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Those beats obviously sort of resonate. The other thing we're doing is on our platform, we have about 7 local language channels that really that talk about our culture, that preserve our language. If I'm at home, I don't speak. I mean, we don't really sit around speaking American English to each other. But I mean, I think that we do a very good job of preserving our culture. On any given weekend in Nigeria, you will feel alien if you go to any of our celebrations. So I think it's all about balance, and I think we're finding that balance. Thank you. And how do we stay young? I'm going to let Peter take that.
I think that, when I started a magazine, hire as many interns as you can that are 19 and 20. And I think, as much as, I will say I do have the new iPhone 6 Plus, if you're all jealous. And I didn't wait in line, I pre-ordered. My sister pre-ordered. But, we spend all our time, like, who knew that, in 15 years I would have never, like this. But I think there's no substitute for style, seeing it on the street, whether that's in New York or Nigeria or Paris or Tokyo is the hot spot, always. So I think that as connected as you can stay with this and follow people, really, you've got to be out and about. And if, as I get older, I'm going to be out and about less, you kind of find, your people to kind of bring you the news that are excited. You can't report nightlife from here. It's like concerts people used to do lighters, and now they're like living through this. So it's like to remove that is when you really experience and discover, I think, the base of it.
Amazing. Okay, so I think we have to end on that note, but that was fantastic.
Thank you.
Fascinating conversation. Thank you.